And you're at Cracking the Cashflow Code, and my guest today is Aaron Longmoon, and Aaron is the CEO of Zephyr Connects and the originator of the Ideal Fit recruiting system. So by the last thing I just said, you're probably going to figure out that Aaron is an expert at hiring. And I can tell you something for a fact. If you're not hiring well, it's no way you're ever going to have an economically or a personally sustainable business. So let's bring Aaron on and we can start the conversation. Hey, Aaron, how are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Josh. I'm excited to be here.
My pleasure. I'm excited to have you. This is a topic it's near and dear to my heart. So
Yeah.
let's start talking about, um, what is the ideal fit employee?
Great question. I'm glad you're starting with that. So, here at Zephyr, we believe that the ideal fit employee is not necessarily someone who just has the skills, the experience, and maybe the education that you're looking for, but they also will fit your culture. They resonate with your core values. They can fit with your vision and mission and the goals of your company. They can help you drive that forward. They get along really well and fit well with your team. It's a really holistic view of what the right kind of employee is for your unique business.
So how do you know if you find one of them?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I have to admit, I think there's trial and error. You cannot be a startup entrepreneur and know exactly who your ideal fit employee is going to be. It takes some time to really learn, but it starts with knowing your own company first. You have to know your core values. You have to understand the dynamics are within your team. You have to know your leadership style. You have to know your mission. You really have to understand the culture and sort of the dynamics of your own company and what drives your company and what also makes your company unique. So the better you know your own company, the easier it will be to find that ideal fit. But some of the other ways to know is looking at the kinds of employees that you have had in the past who really have felt like they were the good fit for you, whether it was just at that time or even currently, and think about the things that unite those great employees. Is it their attitude? Is it their core values? Is it their behavior? If it's behavior, like what about their behavior? So you kind of have to be in business a little bit in order to truly understand who your ideal fit employee is. And then you have to be really observant and really objective in order to figure it out.
So do you guys actually have a system for how you go about hiring folks?
We do. We do. We call it the ideal fit recruiting system. So it all fits together really well. But we do have a process that we follow and that we also teach our clients in what we really feel is the best way to determine if someone's the ideal fit for you. So it's a little different than some of the ways that other people, might be teaching recruitment these days. Do you want me to
So
dive right
could,
in?
yeah, I'd like to dive
Yeah.
in and find out
Yeah.
what it is.
Okay. Well, some of it is that, again, the foundation, again, is knowing your business. So, all those things that I just talked about are really critical to start there. So, if you don't already know all those things, take the time to figure them out, write them down. Don't just know them in your head. Write them down. And then you also, one of the big key differences in the way we look at recruiting compared to maybe a number of other resources out there is we think of recruiting as marketing and sales. So the first part, which is like your recruiting campaign, your job post, and the things that you're putting out in the world to say, hey, we're hiring right now, that's your marketing part of the process. And then the sales part of the process is once you have someone that you're really interested in talking to, right? So if you think about it from marketing first, you want to think of your ideal fit employee in the same way you would think about your ideal client, right? Like you have a persona or a avatar, as people are using nowadays, to describe your ideal client, right? So you want to do the same thing when you're thinking about your ideal employee. So we go so far as you actually want to write down a persona profile. You want to think about not just, again, what's on the resume, but you want to think about what kind of behaviors do they have, what are their core values, what's important to them, what drives them. What kind of personality do they have? Maybe even go so far as to think about their interests, their you know, demographic information. You know, you kind of want to get a really dialed in picture of who this ideal fit employee is for your unique company and get that written down. And then you want to think about, well, okay, think about from their perspective. What's going to be attractive and exciting to them about your job and your company? And think about it from their point of view in terms of the messaging you want to create. So, for example, you know, here at Zephyr, we're all about people first. We really love people. We're all about changing the world. We're all about creating great matches between employers and employees. So we want people who that resonates with, that's easily, you know, equally important to them as it is to us. So the first message we're going to put out on our own job post is going to be something about that. Like, do people matter to you above all else? Might be the first sentence of our own job post, right? Like, that's the kind of message that's going to stop the right kind of person to look at our job post and to take a moment and see if we're the right fit for them and to hopefully apply. So that's the
Okay.
first kind of like steps. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question. We have
Yeah.
marketing, we have sales, but between marketing and sales, we probably should have dating,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
which is the
I
interview
feel like,
process.
okay, keep going. Yes. And I feel like the sales and dating part is sort of a part of the same process. That's where you're like trying each other on. So keep going though. I
The
think,
dating becomes sales if you decide this is the person you want. But
right.
if you're having multiple people do interviews, you're dating, then you put a team together, decide whether you want to offer the job, then you move into sales. I mean, too often I see business owners go from they go to sales right away before they date. In other words,
Right.
they've really not done a good job of figuring out whether this person is probably going to be a good fit for your company.
Right. Right.
And we focus on fit because, in my belief, if they're not a fit, you're likely to
Hmm.
hire a brilliant jerk, and nobody wants brilliant jerks in their company.
Right. 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 Exactly. We feel the same way. Yeah.
So,
So
do you,
go ahead.
do you have an interview process you recommend people use, or a form to, write down how, or a system so you have a
Mhm.
standardized process for interviewers to evaluate and say yes, no, any of that sort of
Right.
stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have, just, you know, on our website, we do have a download for some interview questions that are really help for behavior and that culture fit piece. But some of our philosophy around interviewing, you know, every position is going to be slightly different, but there should be some similarities no matter what the role, which is where you're going to determine if they're the right culture fit for you. And the way that we train our own recruiters and we really advise other people to do is think about it. This is not necessarily easy for everybody to pick up on, but think about, you're trying to look under the hood, right? Like, you're trying to go deeper and really understand what makes that person tick. The resume only tells so much story, and even behavioral questions like, tell me a story about when you, or, you know, those kinds of scenario questions where you want people to tell a story. You want to go deeper than this key story that they tell. Like, they might say, yeah, you know, I had led this project, and you know, the objection was X, and I achieved that objection, you know, 5 days before the deadline and under budget. And you're like, okay, well, that sounds really great, but tell me more about that. Like, how did you do that? Who did you do it with? Tell me about things that frustrated you. What were some of the hurdles that you had to get over in order to get to that outcome? You know, like, you want to dig a lot deeper into a story than just accepting the like top level story. So we do things what we call the coach approach, and it's actually an actual like approach out there for coaches, but it's a way of getting people to open up more and go deeper with their stories. So ask questions like, tell me more, go deeper. Yeah, how did you feel about that? What frustrated you? You just want to be as curious as possible and less interrogative. When people feel like they're being interrogated in an interview, they are actually going to shut down and just tell you what they want to hear. So that we have found over time that the better approach is to be very curious, genuinely interested, and just keep asking a layer, like, peel away the layers And that's truly how you're going to know if that person's behavior are driven by what core values they're driven by, and do those resonate with what you're looking for in that person. So those are some of the keys. And like I said, on our website, we do have on our homepage, if you just scroll down to the resources, which I'll share with you the address later, there is a list of specific behavioral specific questions, interview questions that you can use.
So we like to take that past the questions to, we use a form where we call can do, will do, fit factors, which I stole from Robert Half about 35 years ago
Mm-hmm.
uh, with his book that he wrote, Robert Half on Hiring. And what we do is we have 5 traits, and under each of those are 4 or 5 traits, and then we rate them on a scale of 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get to fit factors and will do's, we often say, tell us about a time about
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, or a
Mm-hmm.
time you felt disrespected at work, or tell us about a
Right.
time where things didn't go well at work. And what we're listening for is and I always ask the question, tell me about a time when things didn't go well, because my number one value is personal responsibility. And what I'm listening for very simply is, are they taking responsibility for when
Right.
things went wrong? Or are they justifying why it wasn't their fault? Or
Right.
are they blaming somebody else? Often they'll say, well, if I didn't have this idiotic boss.
Right. It's always an us versus them, right? It's which is something we're hoping to change. But I think that what the key point that I feel I want to point out about what you just said is that you have to look at your core values, and yours is personal responsibility. And that's what you're looking for in the story, right? And so, like, if one of ours is people first, we're going to be looking for how they put other people before themselves. If another business's core, like number one core value is honesty, they're going to look for ways in which that employee was in their story, in which ways they were able to come forth and be truly honest, even if it was hard. So I think it's, again, goes back to really knowing your core values of your business and driving those questions to help reveal those qualities in your candidates.
Yeah, that means before you even start a hiring process, you really should go
Mm-hmm.
through a values clarification process
Right.
for you and your
Right.
business, where not only do you come up with what your 3 to 5 top values are, but also you need to put a clarifying statement around each of those values so other
Correct.
people know what you're talking about.
Right.
For
Right.
example, one of ours is simplification.
Mm-hmm.
So our clarifying statement for that is, we take the complicated and make it simple.
Right.
Now, I could say simplification. There's a pretty good chance that you would come up with a different definition than mine.
Right. I might
So,
say find the simplest way, right? Like that might
right,
be my interpretation, which is not
right.
it's not at all what you mean. Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
sort of a subset of what I mean, but but again, what I find is that if I don't describe what a value, the definition is, nobody else
Mhm.
knows. Now, I
Right.
don't want to tell my applicant that while I'm interviewing, because then they're just going to tell me what I want to hear and not what I need to hear.
Hmm.
Does that
Right. There
make
is
sense?
that too. Yeah. That's why you have to do more than just interview, right? Because you want to
So,
look for consistencies in behavior throughout the whole vetting process.
so does Zephyr do recruiting, or do you teach people how to hire?
We actually do recruiting ourselves. We do it for our clients, but launching in 2023, we are going to be teaching our methodology to people who want to do the DIY approach or have a team maybe that actually can do recruiting but just need a framework. So that's
So
coming
you're
up
so
soon.
so you're actually an executive recruiting company.
Well, when you say executive, that's not exactly how we see ourselves. We are actually fractional recruiting department for our clients. So we will actually recruit
Okay.
any and all positions that our clients need. So it isn't just executives, and we don't do what you would say traditional headhunting approach. We use
Okay.
our approach.
What's I mean, one difference is, and the reason I want to go down this little rabbit hole is that
Yeah, sure.
when I look at headhunters, they're really good on technical skills, but they're really
Exactly.
bad on cultural skills, and they're
Right.
really bad on what we call will do, which is, are they willing to do the activities? Is the applicant willing to do the activities that will make them successful in the job? And what I'm
Right.
hearing you folks do is something I've been hammering every headhunter I ever talk to. about, and they always say, well, we can't do that. And I always
Yep.
disagree. And it appears you do too.
Yep, I do. Definitely, I do. I mean, if we're going to be the recruiting department for our clients, we have to understand that whole cultural fit, the attitudes, the behaviors that drive, and we're not just looking at a resume. So, our vetting process is similar to what the internal vetting process would be for our clients, and we just do it for them basically. So, anything from those deeper dive type interviews, we do video interviews, we do lengthy phone interviews. We spend 2 to 2.5 hours with each one of our candidates. We're not talking to them for 20 minutes and passing them on. We're really getting to know them. And when we do reference checks, we actually still do good old fashioned reference checks, but the way we do it is the same way. We're looking for storytelling. We're looking for a different approach when we do our reference checks to see if the stories we're being told by the candidate are consistent with the stories that were being told by either a previous colleague or employer or whoever it is that we're talking to. So we are going much deeper than the typical headhunter or the typical recruiter.
So that's interesting. You're doing interviews or you're looking for references from employers. We teach our clients
Mm-hmm.
not to give information. We say you can answer one
Yeah,
question. Are
yep,
they
I know,
eligible
and
for
that's kind of
rehire? Yes
different.
or no?
Yeah, and we do ask that same question. But the thing is, we've learned over time that even if the answer is no, it doesn't mean because it's behavior. It could be because that position was eliminated. It could, like, you need to understand the reasoning for the yes or the no. Tell me why you would rehire them. What about them was so great? Why wouldn't you rehire them? Was it them, or was it something about your structure? Or was it that you guys reorganized and you got rid of that whole position? Or, there's usually, again, more to the story than just the top level. So I love that you and I have different approaches, because I think it just goes to show that there's one way to, there's more than one way to, as they say, skin the cat, which I really don't like that. But you get the drift.
Well, 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 the truth is, what we're saying are first cousins to each other. There's nothing
Yeah,
that we're saying here where I'm disagreeing with what your approach or you're disagreeing with my approach.
right.
I have talked to many people, especially in the headhunting world, who I've disagreed with their approach. And I just say, the chance of you getting a good person the first time around is not especially high.
Yeah, right. Right. For the headhunters, you mean? Yes, that is very
Yeah.
true. Their track record, unfortunately, is fairly low. Our track record is better. We're still dealing with humans, and humans can still, no matter how much vetting you do, pull the wool over your eyes or, show up and be someone different. But for the most part, we've got a really great track record, and our people tend to stay longer than the typical recruiter track record as well.
Well, my guess is, the system we use, we're successful if you use the system the way it's designed 80 to
Right.
85% of the time.
Right. Right.
Before we put that system in place, we were successful about 35% of the time.
Right.
So even though it's a little bit clunky, a little bit inconvenient, takes a little bit more time,
Hmm.
it actually saves time and money because I'm only hiring, my washout rate is relatively small versus I have
Right.
to hire three people to get one person right, which could take
Right.
me over a year.
Right. And a lot of money. And we did some research, and we found that a lot of DIY entrepreneurs who hire themselves are spending about 70 hours per hire, which is, I mean, think about that. If you've hired 3 people this year, how many hours of that your time is that? And they don't realize it because they're peppering it in between things, right? Like it's a little bit in between here, a little bit in between here. They're not taking 70 hours, 7 straight or 8 straight work days and doing it. They're fitting it in. But when they collectively add it all together, it's a lot of time. And then when you make an incorrect hire, right? Someone who isn't the right fit, then, oh my gosh, I mean, that was a waste. And you got to go do it again, plus the money, plus the upset to the team, plus the time and productivity. I mean, it really adds up to not get it right. I do want to give permission, like I said, especially to DIYers. Like I said, it can take some time to really understand who your right fit is. I don't think you can start a business on day one and know exactly who it is. So you got to give grace to the learning curve. But once you really figure out who your company is, all those values and things, then it becomes much easier to figure out who your ideal fit is. And then, yes, if you follow a system, it can really cut that significantly down, both the mistakes and the amount of time it takes, both of those. So,
So, Aaron, we only have a couple minutes left, and I'm
yeah.
curious, what are the most common hiring mistakes you see private business owners make?
Some of them are not vetting enough. So they just do a quick interview, 1-2 interview. Hiring off a resume is probably the biggest one we've seen over time. Is the resume looks amazing, the person talks for 15 minutes and they sound incredible, and you make the hire right then and there. The other one is hiring people, unfortunately, that or people who And I know there's a lot of people out there, a lot of business coaches and stuff who say hire from your network, like ask for referrals, people who know the people are like you, therefore the people they know are probably going to be a good fit for you. We have found that to backfire 9 times out of 10. Not that it happens all the time, but it's really challenging. And then you feel this interesting emotional challenge of, okay, my cousin's best friend is not working out, but I feel really bad letting them go. And then you don't fire fast enough. So it can create a very interesting dynamic that can get people very stuck. So we find, especially for key roles, it's really important to hire very objectively if you can. Take off those rose-colored glasses, right? And really look at the person in front of you objectively.
Yeah, the biggest mistake I see is when employers hire for technical skills only.
Yeah, that's the resume. Yep, yep. Like
Yes.
the resume looks great. Let's hire you. Yeah.
And what I find they do is they will hire on technical skills and they never bother to look at any of the other stuff. And the truth
Mhm.
is, you can screen for technical skills,
Right.
but you should
Yeah.
interview for fit and are they willing to do the job the way you
Right.
want it done.
Right. Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Your resume is going to tell me whether you can program in C++, but
Right.
it doesn't tell me anything else, or at
Yep.
least it tells me you claim you can program in C++.
Well, and there's that too.
Yeah,
Right.
you
Right.
might want to
Right.
actually do a test to see if they
Right.
can, but that's a different conversation. So,
Correct.
Aaron, unfortunately, we are out of time, and you're a lovely
Yeah.
guest, and
Thank
you've got great information.
thank
I'm
you.
going to bet that folks listening to this episode are going to want to try to find you. So, how would they do
Yes.
that?
That would be great. So our website is Zephyr, which I do spell because not everybody knows that word. It's Zephyr connects. So zephyrconnects.com. And just so everyone knows, Zephyr means a gentle breeze. Not everybody knows what the word means. So zephyrconnects.com, and everything's there. Our contact information, these freebies that I've talked about, and how we work. We've got a ton of resources on our resources page. So that is always the best way to reach us. But you can always reach me directly at Erin@zephyrconnects.com as well.
Cool. And I have two things I'd like you to do. This is
Yes.
381st time I've asked you to do this, which is
Okay.
please go to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Give us an honest rating and review. And while you're there, you can subscribe. And every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, actually every Monday morning now at 6 a.m., we make these things go live so you can download and listen. We've been doing this now for 7.5 years. And we always have these great conversations like with Aaron. You're going to learn lots of stuff about how you can make your business economically and personally sustainable. The second thing I want you to do is I've been writing a newsletter for 45 years, the last 19 years. It's been weekly and electronic, and I call it Josh's Musings. And I get to muse about what it takes for you to create an economically and personally sustainable business. Gee, there's a theme running through this. And uh, sometimes I just write about what I'm thinking about. Like I just turned 70 and I wrote about, staying relevant in the world as you age out. So those are kind of things that you as a business owner, especially been around for 20 years or more, are going to want to learn. Really easy to get. You just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. Give me your first name and your email address, and you're on the list. And next Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, there'll be a newsletter arriving in your inbox. So this is Josh Patrick. You're with Aaron Longmoon. You're at Cracking the Cashflow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really